The moment that lit the spark that began bringing to light the reality that things were being hidden from me happened even before I was told by my husband that he was divorcing me. I think perhaps this was partly why I was so confused by it. It was a day that started out like any other day, but it would end up being the day that I would continue to look back on as when I began to realize that lies and deceit were a part of my marriage. And it would lead me down an endless path of wondering how many lies had I been told during my marriage and how many things had been hidden from me. Lies do this to people's minds. I was sitting in my living room when my son came in to ask about reordering an item that we had gotten previously on Amazon. I told him that I would go ahead and reorder it. When I went into the Amazon cart to look for the item, I noticed thousands of dollars worth of items that had been ordered on our account and were awaiting delivery. I was shocked. None of it looked familiar as anything for our family. A year or so before, we had had one of our credit cards used for fraudulent charges, and this was immediately where my mind jumped to. I thought somebody must be using our Amazon account to make fraudulent orders. I jumped up and ran to my husband's home office, and I knocked on his door. He told me to come in, and I feverishly began to tell him about the charges and how somebody must have hacked into our Amazon account. I was breathless as I told him about my discovery. "We better hurry and alert Amazon," I said to him, proud of myself for saving us from this fraud. He stared at me for a bit. I thought maybe he was as shocked as I was. I waited for him to start bellowing out how much he hated thieves and to grab his phone to call Amazon and our bank to take care of the problem. After a few minutes of just staring at me, he told me that the charges were for his brother. I was so relieved that we hadn't been hacked, and I said, "Oh, thank goodness," and went about my day. It wasn't until towards the end of the day that I realized that in all of the excitement of the morning and the worry about our Amazon account being hacked, I'd forgotten to go back online and reorder the item for my son. So I went back into our Amazon account to place the item in the cart. The thousands of dollars in charges were gone. I can't explain this moment. A bad feeling started coming over me. Something felt weird. Something felt off. I wondered why the charges were there this morning, but were now missing. I'm not that familiar with Amazon. The most I do is look for things that are needed, mostly for my boys or my animals, and I place them in the cart. That's really the extent of my Amazon use and knowledge. But that day, a cloud started forming in my mind about these charges. I made myself look over the site and educate myself about it a little. Something I wouldn't have normally taken the time to do, but a small little voice in me seemed to be whispering, "Look and see, look and see." I searched around the site to see why I would no longer see the charges that had been there earlier that day. In my search of the site, I learned that there are different places that you can place your orders. There are even places you can put orders so they can't be viewed. This was where I now found the charges, but it didn't make sense to me. Why would my husband now put the items where they couldn't be viewed? Why would he want to hide them from my view, especially if I'd already seen them? I walked to his office and casually asked him why the items had been moved after we'd spoken about them. Surely there was a good explanation. Once again, he stared at me. He appeared shocked that I was bringing it up again. He seemed to stumble with his words and told me that he had originally put them in the wrong place, and since they were for his brother, he now had them in the right place. I told him okay and left his office, but something continued to feel off. Throughout the rest of the day, thoughts started coming into my head, and I couldn't shake them. Surely his brother had his own Amazon. Why would he need to place order for his brother's on our Amazon account? He had never done this before. And most importantly, why would he need to hide the orders? It felt so silly, but so dark at the same time. While lying in bed that night, my mind started flashing back to some of the items that I had seen in the order. They didn't seem to be something that his brother would have ordered. Why wouldn't thoughts about this order leave me alone, I wondered. For the next few days, the clouds continued to grow and linger. Something was off and it felt really bad. I just didn't understand why my husband would need to lie to me about anything financial, including an Amazon order, so it didn't make sense. I approached him again and told him that something felt weird and asked him if this was really his order and not his brother's. I asked him to please just be honest with me about it because it was starting to make me feel strange and I would rather everything just be out in the open. I've always hated secrets. He became angry with me and told me that the order was his brother's and that I needed to let it go. I approached him about 4 times in the next few days, almost begging him to please just set things straight, as something felt so off, and I really just wanted to clear the air on it. I told him I didn't care about the orders, I just cared about how strange everything felt about it. Each time I approached him, he got more and more angry with me and continued to insist that the orders were for his brother. And he told me that I was the one with the problem, not him. The angrier he got about it, the more I felt like something really bad was going on. You can't understand that feeling unless you've experienced it. I had never thought of him to be dishonest with me about something before. Was it all in my head? Something told me it wasn't. By the morning of the 3rd or 4th day, I was standing in our dining room and he walked up to me, stood before me in silence, and looked at me. He hesitated a bit, cleared his throat, and then he told me that he'd been lying to me about the orders. He said they were his. I stood there quietly and listened to him. He said he had no real explanation as to why he had lied about it, but if I had anything I wanted to say about it, I needed to say it then and there, and then he didn't want it talked about again. I continued to stand there and look at him. After all the lying that he'd been doing over the past few days, and all the finger pointing at me being the one with the problem, I was numb and I had nothing to say. I said nothing, absolutely nothing. I just continued to look at him. He looked at me, turned, and walked away. And that was the last we ever talked about it. When I look back on that day, I am acutely aware of just how much something greater than me played a part in me finding those orders. He had meant for me to never know about them. He was in shock when I discovered them. Had it not been for this moment, I may never have realized that he hid things from me. I may never have realized that he lied to me. We certainly had problems in our marriage, like everyone does, but I'd always viewed him as an honest person. He had told me more than one occasion he hated liars. I believed him. I know that they say when someone is caught doing something, it's most likely not the first time they've done it. It's just the first time they've been caught. And I realized that this was most likely my reality. I wondered just how much he had been hiding from me when it came to our finances, and I would come to learn some of it during our divorce. But even aside from financial things, finding out that someone lies to you makes you start to wonder about every single thing in your relationship with them. How much had he hidden from me during all of our years together? How much had he lied to me during all of our years together? It made me wonder about every single thing. It made me doubt every single thing. Divorce. Divorce sucks. Divorce that involves lying and deceit sucks even more.